Hey everybody, this is Anne and welcome back to Painting Big. Today we are going to do a video about contrast. In looking over my color theory videos, I realized I never did one on contrast, and although I talked about it a bit in some of those videos on the complementary color schemes and the triadic color schemes, it really deserves its own video because contrast is really the king as far as what's going to make a color scheme succeed or not. Alright, let's get to it. Oh, we love contrast. We love contrast so much. A high contrast model with darks and lights, especially right next to each other, our brains just light up. We love, love, love contrast. So our brains love contrast, then how can we introduce more contrast on our miniatures? And there's a few ways to increase contrast on your miniatures, and that's what we're going to talk about next. I'm going to show you a bunch of models that I've painted for Reaper Pro Tips, and I'm going to talk about the light and dark choices on each one, and then I'm going to show you under the black and white camera how the model actually looks when you look at it in grayscale. All right? Okay, so our first model, let's go with an easy one because the color scheme wasn't even created by me. It's actually from the concept art of this character. It's Pathfinder 2nd edition, cell scale. The original art is by Wayne Reynolds. So the easiest way to introduce more contrast in your figures, no matter what level you are at, you can do this as a rank beginner, is to alternate light, dark, and mid on your models. So if we look at Celtiel here, we can clearly see that his hair is light, his face is mid. We've got a little bit of dark here in this dark red on the shoulder pads, but then we've got light outlining it and light underneath the face, right? So we're going light, mid, light, dark, dark, light, and then there's a lot of dark here in the middle. It kind of all blends together. It's a bunch of different straps. These Pathfinder figures are elaborate. But we do have a little bit of like a lighter thing here with the dagger showing up. We can see that the sleeve is mid, the handle and the hand here are dark. We've got another mid and then light. We've got light, dark, and mid here. And then even here, down here on the bottom, we've got, mid, dark, and then a little bit of light there at the center. You can see that lighter piece of cloth right there. So there's a lot of alternating light, darks, and mids. And sometimes you won't be able to alternate everything. And I'll show you an example of that when I get to my last example for the day and what I did in that case. So let's look at Celtiel underneath the camera. And if you've never done this before, if you've got an iPhone at least, all you have to do is swipe up. That gives you these symbols right here. If you go to the far right, you're going to get to the filters. And if you go far enough over in the filters, you get to mono. Mono is grayscale. And we're going to be using that to look at these figures. All right, let's see if we can do this. There we go. All right, so as we look at Celtiel, we can very clearly see the things that we notice just looking at him regularly, right? We can see that the hair and the fireball are definitely light. You can see that whole arm, the fireball with the dark hand and the mid on the sleeve. You can very clearly see the face is actually more of a mid value in this. So if I was using this to troubleshoot, I would be able to see like where my good and bad parts were. We can see the dagger at his waist, even with that confusion of dark around his chest and waist. We can see the sword very clearly. So this is fairly successful. Like we can maybe see that jumble of detail at his waist is kind of confusing. But in general, the key points all stand out because we're alternating dark and light. So let's continue and look at some other models. Let's look at a model that, let's look at this one. All right, so Raven Guy, another Pathfinder model. With him, you can see, again, clearly I'm trying to alternate. I knew that his feathers and his feet and his hands were going to be dark, so I went with a lot of light on the rest of it. The white sleeves and the white pants with the orange, and then another light here. So here we're going light, mid, light, dark, right? So you see me alternating in there. I tried to make the belt a dark color, but there's not a lot of it showing, so it maybe wasn't as successful as the other things. These two little plates up here I made light because a lot of this seemed to be like kind of darkish mid. So let's look at him underneath the camera. All right, yeah, we can really see that the whole chest is a mess, that all just kind of blends together. So if I was using this for troubleshooting after the fact, I could go back in and make some of those areas dark. That would probably be my best move. Hopefully not to have it conflict with the neck too much, but like there's an armor place down there in the front I could have gone a lot darker with, and that would have given me more contrast here. But you can clearly see the dark slights and mids. And as we progress through this, you're going to see kind of how this lines you up to have a more impactful model. So here's one I feel like I've kind of failed on. He's a Knoll Berserker by Julie Guthrie. So with him, I've got a mane and a torso, like the fur in general, whether it is gray or rusty, the fur is all like the same kind of value. And the necklace is only showing up because I've lined it, probably. We do have darker paws and a darker muzzle, so that's helping. So I feel like we did okay as far as like a mid on the arms and a dark on the paw, but then we've got more dark here. He's got some issues. So let's look at him under the camera. All right, there we go. Yeah, so the mane completely disappears, and all we can see, like the only reason we're getting anything here, right, is because I've highlighted and shaded that torso so well. But it all does blur together. Worse, the legs are really just kind of blurring together. The purple is a little darker, the purple and black, but not quite dark enough. I could have maybe kept those a little bit more dramatic, or I could have highlighted the top of the legs and kept them more the shade of the torso. That would have given me a little more contrast down there. On the other hand, the dark axe handles with the dark paws, they are showing up as separate, and the bright axe heads work just great, so that's good. And the muzzle is making the face show up actually very well. So when you've done something like this, the way that I fixed it is really evident, right? I'm essentially choosing to go with color contrast instead. So I'm both using a warm cool here, because the gray is a cooler gray, and the mane is very warm. And I'm also using a muted versus a more saturated. And another example of this actually is on Celtio, who we just looked at. So you could argue that the red liner in here, see that little band of red, is not that dissimilar from the black here, right? And also from some of the shadows in the grays. But it's a red, so it's definitely warmer than a black or a gray. So we're utilizing that in order to bring that color out. So those are the other ways that you can introduce contrast, as far as if you're not interested in light and dark, or you've just, maybe you've just made your decisions on that and you're not willing to rejigger your color scheme on a model. But you can choose to make something more saturated and less saturated, and you can choose to make something cooler and something warmer. You do want to be careful on this, because as I discussed in the color theory videos, muted colors and really saturated colors don't like each other. So in order to make this work, the orange here is very brown. The red here is very brown, right? These are very muted red oranges. So when I put them next to another muted color, they work a little bit better that way. Another example of this kind of fail, because I love my muted colors sometimes, is Gnome King we've been painting. So Gnome King, if you really look at him, he has a lot of very similar values. Like if you look at all of this stuff, it kind of looks like the same value. Like there's nothing super bright or super dark in this whole torso area. His face does look lighter, but the crown is, again, got the same problem the torso has. So let's look at him underneath the camera. Now here we can see he's actually better than we thought. And the reason for that is the other way to introduce light-dark contrast, to darken your shadows and punch up your highlights. That entire chest area, all of the details are showing up, not because I've changed my values on my base colors, but because I've darkened my shadows, I've lined everything with a dark color, and I've punched up my highlights wherever it was appropriate. And for that reason, we are seeing enough contrast to pick out everything. And we can see that the skin is plainly lighter, but otherwise everything else would be the same shade, the same value. So, not ideal. But again, just like with the Knoll, the thing that saves it here is the warm, cool contrast, right? We've got this bluish dark steel here, and I'm putting a warm gold right against it. I've got this green with blue shadows, so cooler, up against this red. So that's complementary on top of it, right? But it's also a cool and warm. And then I've got cool and warm, right? And again, cool leaves, warm top. These are shaded with blue, these are shaded with red. So the warm and cool contrast and the highlighting and shading contrast are what is saving this model from being just kind of a blob. And if I was using a limited palette to paint this, but had I had a full range of colors available to me, I definitely could have made this a better model if I had put in some real darks and real lights. All right, let's move on. I don't want this to be too long of a video. Who's next? Barbie Dwarf. We'll do Barbie Dwarf. I love Barbie Dwarf. Now, Barbie Dwarf has a different problem. So, like Knoll was a lot of mid-tone, right? A lot of mid. Barbie Dwarf is a lot of light. She's got light skin. She's got light hair. She's got light pink. She's got light armor, light gold. She's Barbie Dwarf. So, what I'm expecting to see is a model that's got a lot of light on her. And sure enough, there she is. Look at all those light colors. You get a little bit of dark on her thighs from the chainmail, which I definitely kept dark on purpose. But otherwise, the only dark parts are really the back of the shield and like the shadows that I've painted in. Her belt is a dark color, but it's got a whole bunch of gold bling all over it, so you're really not seeing it. So she's kind of like this floating puddle of light with a couple of dark accents where her shadows are. So if I had been less enamored of Barbie at this point, I could have chosen to make the armor, probably the best fix here would be make the armor darker. Make it a dark gray metal and pinpoint my highlights more, make it less shiny and blingy. But that would have been very un-Barbie of me, right? So instead, what have I done? I've accentuated the shadows, for example, under the breastplate, and I've kept the chainmail darker here. I'm also working with a warm and cool, right? I usually put a little bit of blue into my NMM steel, and so that's cooler. And then I've got this pink, which is definitely warmer. Here on the loincloth. I'm very, very heavily relying on kind of cool versus warm to save Barbie Dwarf. Pink. All right, next up, Jolie the Scribe. Very much a classic Anne model as far as the color, the way I choose colors. The blue is the dark here, everything else is, the cream is the light, and the gold is the mid. There's also some red. The red is actually the same value as the blue, so it would blend in with itself, with each other, except that we've got a warm and cool again, right? So when we put her underneath, we're going to see, my guess is mid to dark on there, light on the face, light on the collar. So this is less than ideal. The fact that the skin and the collar are kind of, the same. You can even see here, before I even grayscale it, you can see they're the same value. But I was working with this color scheme, and so I chose to do that. Also, because it's near the face, I didn't mind having a ton of light up here. Obviously, her glasses are also light. But then we got this blue that's going to register as darker. And it kind of and it works with her costume, the alternating cream and blue, in order to make the details come out. I've also shaded the inside of these sleeves, right? So that's also going to come off as dark, is my guess. Let's see here. Yep. So there we are. Again, you can see the collar just blends kind of right into the skin. You can see some detailing from the gold. But the blue is definitely the dark here. It's still enough for you to be able to get the gist of the figure, but not everything shows up clearly in grayscale, does it? So definitely some things to think about there. Some things I could have maybe done better. Here's another one. She's actually, my guess is that she's going to be a lot of mid. You can definitely see that she has no real bright light colors except for her sword, and a little bit of the highlight here on the blue-gray. So let's throw the half-work rogue here underneath the camera. She actually looks better than I expected. So the skin is showing up light. We've got the red definitely showing up as kind of a mid-dark, and then the flaps on the armor on her thighs here, these guys, the edges are showing up lighter. which I painted them kind of a leather color. And then the pants are light and the boots are dark. So we can see the details though, right? Because her biceps, her skin there, that's light, and then her arm guards there are dark. And so we are alternating a little bit. On the flaps and her legs here, we can also see that's dark and the outer rim is light, right? Although the pants right under that are also light. So unfortunately, I've got a light and a light next to each other before I get to another dark. So that's less ideal, but you can see where I've shaded and lined there. So the details are still coming out pretty well here, all things considered. And we can see that model here so you can see where it was. So yeah, my blue-gray and my leather color here are very similar. What I could have done is made this leather color much more shiny. I could have gone gold or something with it. Because she's a rogue, I didn't want to go with too much bling. So that was a character call that I did, even though I knew that it might make the model less effective overall. But in general, actually, she worked out pretty well. Going with the dark hair was good because it made the face even look lighter. So let's go down to our last model, which I consider the best one, the most effective as far as contrast. Kitty Cat. The Cat Bard by Glenn Harris. Cat Bard with hurdy-gurdy. I mean, come on. Where else are you going to get something like this? So he's awesome. He's fantastic. And he's exactly what I always talk about with alternating dark and light. And I believe I used that. I wasn't sold on a color scheme for him when I started him, other than I wanted to do like the red velvet vest. So I started from there and just kind of worked out using my alternating lights and darks. So we've got up here, we've got mid with the red on his cap. The purple would normally be a dark, but since I put it next to black fur, it actually looks a little more mid. So we've got mid, dark, light, with the fur being the lightest thing. Dark, because he's got the dark fur cape around his shoulders. I do have another dark here with the vest, but again, here I'm going with cool and warm in order to separate them, right? And next to both of these darks, I've got light, the lightest, this cream-colored shirt. Followed by mid on the bracer, light on the paw, and then we've got the sword, which just kind of, it's white. It's got white edging. It's going to show up. Down here on the waist, I'm definitely making a firm decision on light-dark alternation. So I've got essentially dark, light, mid for the straps, light, mid for the straps, light, and then dark again, right? And we've got light on the paws. Here with the strap on the front, this is why I wanted to talk about what do you do. So I could have made this lighter and it would have showed up really well against this fur and against the red vest, right? But it also goes across this cream-colored sash. So that would have been a mistake because then it would have gone to invisible there. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered as much because you're not really looking at this area as much, but I went with the mid anyway, even though I knew the mid wouldn't show up as well as a light would, but it shows up across everything. So even though it's only a little bit lighter than the red here, it is lighter than the black, and it is darker than the cream. So it worked, and then when you look at the back, you can see that against the black it does show up quite well. And then back here again, we've got kind of a darker purple with a little bit of a lighter highlight on the hurdy-gurdy here. And then light on the bottom. So more like dark, mid-dark, light. A little less contrast choice here on the back. If I had done a design, I could have done light here instead. I could have made the whole cape a lighter color, but it didn't seem to fit with the character. So again, you take this with a grain of salt, right? This is the way to get a very effective color scheme if you're thinking color theory-wise. But if there are character decisions to be made, you can fudge it a bit. Maybe you get a slightly less effective on the back of the model, but it's still going to work. All right, so let's put Kitty Cat underneath the camera just to make sure. All right, Kitty Cat and Kitty Cat camera. There we are. Yeah, so of all of the models that I put under the camera, everything on this model stands out. The face stands out from the hat, stands out from the vest, stands out from the sleeves, the bracers. You can see all that. You can see his hands. You can see the sash. You can see the legs. You can even see the free hand because I've edged it with a bit of gold. Like this model, the one that I was most stringent about following my light, mid, dark kind of alternation pattern, this model looks the best in grayscale. It shows you that the contrast is there. And when you hold this up against a model that has issues, you really see the difference. So here we have Kitty Cat and Noli, and you can see whose eye you're attracted to. Noli is just not as tight as this guy is. If we look at this model's the closest, right? It had the best result other than Kitty Cat, but it's still not quite as crisp and punchy as Kitty Cat is, right? More of it kind of blends together. And we look at Barbie Dwarf, we can really see how, like, Barbie Dwarf is just a mass of light, and Kitty Cat has alternating light and darks, right? So, yes, you can get a cool-looking model with making contrast errors of sorts. You know, like I said, obviously you want to use your highlights and shadows in that case to pull out details. But you can get the best of all worlds if you use everything. If you line and you highlight and shade and you choose your colors accordingly so that you're alternating light, mid, and dark, you can get a very, very punchy model that looks fantastic. So everything is degrees, guys. Nothing is like nothing is perfect and nothing is like completely imperfect. There's going to be pluses and minuses to everything you look at on your models. But as far as optimizing for color theory, working with your dark mid light, punching your shadows and highlights, thinking about warm and cool contrast, and then sometimes even thinking about muted versus saturated contrast, these things can all help you have a better color scheme. That's what color theory is all about. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully you took something away from it that was valuable. Remember, I have a Patreon. I'm doing a lot more videos lately for YouTube. If you subscribe to my free level, you don't have to pay anything, but you will get to see all of these videos a little bit earlier than the YouTube does. If you care about that, go over and give me a look. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much, and this is Anne signing off.